the night of May 31st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 pushed back from its gate in Rio de Janeiro. The destination, Paris. The aircraft, an Airbus A330-200, was nearly new, clean records, fresh from a major maintenance check just weeks earlier. It was one of the most advanced long-range jets in the world, designed to cross oceans with minimal human input. On board were 228 people and 3 pilots, a standard setup for a long-haul flight that exceeded the normal duty limits for a 2-person crew. In command was Captain Marc Dubois, a seasoned pilot with over 11,000 flight hours. Alongside him were 2 first officers, both experienced but far less senior. Together, they were responsible for one of the most challenging legs in commercial aviation, the transatlantic night crossing. Once airborne, the flight would leave radar coverage for hours, relying solely on onboard instruments and satellite reports to track its progress. At 7:29 p.m. local time. The A330 lifted off from runway 10 of Rio's International Airport, climbing smoothly into the humid evening sky. Everything about the departure was by the book. Standard checklists, steady climb, calm communication. No alarms, no malfunctions, nothing unusual. The controllers watching their radar screens. Flight 447 was just another white symbol moving northeast toward the Atlantic. But within a few hours, that same flight number would vanish from their scopes entirely, without a single distress call, leaving behind one of aviation's most haunting mysteries. By the time Air France Flight 447 leveled off over the Atlantic, everything still looked routine. The Airbus A330 held steady at 35,000 feet, engines humming smoothly, autopilot engaged. But ahead lay one of the most unpredictable stretches of air anywhere on Earth, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a belt of storms that circles the planet near the equator. Every pilot who flies transatlantic routes knows this area. On weather radar, it looks like a jagged wall of red and yellow, marking powerful updrafts, pockets of heavy rain, and invisible turbulence. Night, it's worse. Without visual cues, a crew has to rely entirely on instruments and weather radar, reading shapes and colors that shift with each radar sweep. That night, radar returns showed developing storm cells. The crew decided to alter course slightly to the left, hoping to avoid the worst of it. Their altitude. The air was warmer than expected, too warm for a climb to safer air above the storms. The captain noted the rough air ahead, dimmed the cockpit lights, and prepared for turbulence. Within minutes, the aircraft began to shake as it entered a cluster of high clouds. The sound of rain and ice crystals rattled against the fuselage. This wasn't unusual. Every flight through this region brings moments like this. Brief bursts of turbulence, flashes on the radar, small corrections to stay clear of the weather. But what no one in that cockpit could have known was that this time, those tiny ice crystals would soon trigger a chain reaction that would change aviation forever. At 2 a.m. over the mid-Atlantic, Air France Flight 447 entered a region known for unpredictable storms and invisible threats. From the outside, the Airbus A330 looked steady, slicing through high clouds at 35,000 feet. Inside the cockpit, the glow of the instruments gave no reason for alarm. Then, without warning, the airspeed readings began to fall. Tiny ice crystals, too small to see, too fine to notice, had started to clog the airplane's pitot tubes, the small metal sensors that tell the pilots how fast they're flying. Within seconds, all 3 sensors iced over. The data feeding the flight computers turned unreliable. Autopilot disengaged. The auto-thrust system froze. Suddenly, the flight crew was flying manually in the dark, surrounded by turbulence without knowing their true speed. For pilots, losing airspeed data at high altitude is one of the most dangerous failures imaginable. The airplane's protections, designed to prevent stalls and overspeed, were gone. In their place was a machine responding sharply to every touch. The crew didn't yet know that the readings were false. To them, the aircraft seemed to be slowing down. Their instincts told them to pull back, to raise the nose and keep altitude. It was a subtle moment, quiet, almost routine, but it marked the turning point. A handful of ice crystals had broken the chain of trust between the pilots and their instruments. From this point on, the airplane was flying blind. When the pitot tubes froze, Air France Flight 447 lost its most essential sense, the ability to know how fast it was moving through the air. Within seconds, the autopilot disconnected, and the aircraft handed control back to the pilots. What followed was confusion, not chaos, but the kind of quiet uncertainty that creeps in when trained procedures suddenly stop making sense. With unreliable airspeed readings, the first officer instinctively pulled back on the control stick to keep the nose up, believing they were losing altitude. In reality, the aircraft was already flying too slowly. Each pull increased the angle of attack, reducing lift and pushing the jet closer to an aerodynamic stall. The stall warning sounded, but in their minds, it seemed impossible. This was a modern Airbus at cruise altitude, not a small training plane. They thought the alarm was false, the result of the faulty sensors they had just noticed. Instead of lowering the nose to regain speed, the correct recovery, they held it up, trying to keep the airplane flying. The engines kept producing thrust, but lift was gone. The Airbus climbed briefly, then began to sink, its wings no longer generating enough lift to hold it aloft. This wasn't a failure of technology. It was a failure of understanding, a gap between automation and instinct. For years, pilots had relied on computers to manage flight stability. When the automation vanished, even experienced aviators struggled to recognize what the airplane was telling them. And in that gap, 447 fell silently from the sky. By the time the captain stepped back into the cockpit, the Airbus A330 was no longer flying, it was falling. In the dim glow of the instrument panel, both first officers were pulling on their side sticks, each trying to correct what they believed was a fatal mistake. The problem was that their commands canceled each other out. Airbus side sticks don't move together, so neither pilot could see what the other was doing. What resulted was chaos disguised as teamwork. The aircraft had climbed far too high and far too slow, its wings no longer able to generate lift. The nose was pitched up, the engines were running hard, and the airplane was sinking like a stone. The stall warning blared over and over, but to the crew, the signals made no sense. The instruments were giving them mixed messages, speed readings that jumped, warnings that came and went. In that confusion, instinct took over. Instead of lowering the nose to regain lift, they kept pulling back, believing the plane was diving too steeply. Every second, the descent rate increased, 10,000 feet per minute, then more. The captain tried to take control, but by then, the situation had moved beyond recovery. The airplane was high, slow, and deep into an aerodynamic stall from which no amount of power could save it. Within minutes, Air France 447 vanished from radar, leaving behind not just debris in the Atlantic, but a chilling reminder of how quickly technology and human misunderstanding can unravel even the most advanced machine in the sky. At 2:10 a.m., the Airbus A330 was no longer flying, it was falling. The cockpit was a blur of confusion. The captain had just returned, but the aircraft was already deep in a stall, its wings unable to produce lift. The nose stayed high, engines pushed to full power, yet the plane continued sinking through the darkness over the Atlantic. Every instrument told a different story, every correction made it worse. The two co-pilots were unknowingly pulling against each other, their side sticks canceling one another's commands. Why now? The jet had lost nearly 30,000 feet. The altimeter spun down like a stopwatch running out of time. The stall warning blared, then cut off as airspeed readings vanished again. The captain tried to reset systems, but it was too late. No computer could fix what had become a fully aerodynamic stall. The aircraft dropped at more than 10,000 feet per minute, tail first, engines still producing thrust but offering no lift. At 2:14 a.m., radar contact vanished. In just 3 minutes and 30 seconds, Flight 447 had gone from cruising altitude to impact. The jet hit the Atlantic Ocean belly first, breaking apart instantly. There were no survivors. In the aftermath, investigators found nothing mechanical that doomed the flight, only a breakdown of understanding. The sensors had frozen, but the crew's trust in automation froze too. Without clear airspeed, they lost not just data but perspective. And in modern aviation, that's all it takes for a routine flight to vanish from the sky. When the Airbus vanished into the Atlantic that night, investigators faced a puzzle that seemed almost unreal. How could one of the most advanced jets in the world fall from the sky with no warning, no distress call, and no sign of control? Months later, the answer emerged. Not from a single failure, but from a chain of small, ordinary problems that together became fatal. It began with ice blocking the pitot tubes, the slim sensors that tell the plane how fast it's flying. For a moment, the airspeed readings turned unreliable. The autopilot shut off, and in that instant, the crew had to fly manually at high altitude, something few pilots had ever practiced in real life. Without clear information, instinct took over. The pilot flying pulled back on the controls, climbing when he should have leveled off. The aircraft stalled, but the warning signals were confusing, sometimes silent, sometimes blaring. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The French BEA's final report didn't blame one man or one part. It pointed to a gap in training and design, a cockpit built for trust and automation, flown by humans no longer trained to handle its loss. Their conclusion was simple: modern pilots must relearn the basics. They must train to fly the airplane, not just manage it. Flight 447 became a turning point, a cold reminder that even in an age of computers, the human touch still decides whether a plane stays in the sky.